Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is Megan Giesker from ALA's Public Programs Office. Welcome to today's webinar, When to Go Hybrid, Determining Which Format Best Fits Your Program. Next slide, please. Today's webinar is presented by ALA's Public Programs Office with funding provided by the National Endowment for the Humanities as part of the American Rescue Plan Humanities Organization Grant. Any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this webinar do not necessarily represent those of the NEH or ALA. Next slide, please. A couple of notes about our virtual classroom. Only the presenter has microphone access during the presentation. We will be disabling the chat during the presentation and reopening it during the Q&A discussion. Please save your questions and comments for the end. If you have any technical issues, please use the Q&A window to communicate with ALA staff. Next slide, please. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker for this afternoon. Melissa Wong is an adjunct lecturer in the School of Information Sciences at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, where she teaches courses in reference, instruction, e-learning, and academic librarianship. Melissa is the co-author of Reference and Information Services, an Introduction, 6th edition with Laura Saunders, and co-author, also with Laura Saunders, of the open access textbook, Instruction in Libraries and Information Settings, an Introduction. She was the 2022 recipient of the Reference and User Services Association's Isidore Gilbert Mudge Award for contributions to reference librarianship, and the 2012 recipient of the university's Campus Award for Excellence in Online and Distance Teaching. And with that, I'd like to turn things over to Melissa.
Megan, thank you so much, and good morning or good afternoon to everyone. It is great to see so many folks here today. So today, as our second webinar in this series on hybrid programming, we are going to talk about when to go hybrid and determining which format, and in particular, if hybrid is going to be a good fit for any programs that you are planning. To start with, I wanted to reiterate the definition of hybrid programming that Laura Saunders shared in our first webinar a few weeks ago. And that is that hybrid means classes or events that are run in person and live streamed so that patrons can choose to attend in either format. Now, this definition of a program or an event that's being held in person and online is also often called HyFlex. And I'll put that spelling in the chat for folks. It's HyFlex. And if you're interested in doing a little bit more reading or research on hybrid programming, you might also use HyFlex as a search term because that is the term, especially in higher education, that we use for this kind of format. So with that, why hybrid programming? So some reasons that we might consider a hybrid format for our programming include that it accommodates different patron needs and preferences. I think that while most states and cities have eased up on pandemic restrictions, the reality is that not everyone is comfortable returning to in-person activities. In addition, attending in-person events has always been a challenge for some of our patrons, such as patrons with childcare or transportation issues. And so that hybrid format that allows people to attend a program online really provides a nice option for a wider range of community members to participate in our library's programs. Hybrid programming can also allow for larger audiences for popular programs, since room size limitations aren't going to be so much of a factor. And finally, planning for hybrid programming can offer some increased flexibility in the event of an emergency. So it allows for a smoother pivot to fully virtual programming using those systems that we've already put in place for a hybrid program. Now, while hybrid programming does have a lot of advantages, some programs are going to lend themselves to that hybrid format better than others. When we think about hybrid programming, we want to ensure that we're offering an equivalent experience for both our in-person attendees and our online attendees. Hybrid should not mean just passively watching a live stream if you're sitting at home. And so that's what we're going to focus on today. Things that we need to consider in deciding if a program is going to be a good fit for that hybrid format that's going to give a really good experience to all of our attendees, whether they're in person or online. And to start with, let's imagine what a hybrid setup might look like. So we're going to have some kind of presenter or speaker, presumably at the front of the room, presenting to an audience who is physically present, our in-person audience. At the same time, that speaker will be live streamed to an online audience. And usually that is with a camera that's trained on the speaker and a microphone to pick up whatever the speaker is saying. And then we live stream that out using something like Zoom or similar web conferencing software. And just like you would have a moderator for your in-person audience who's going to welcome the speaker, introduce them, maybe help moderate a Q&A session, you'll need an online moderator to welcome your online audience, answer any questions that they have, and provide tech support. And then if your event has something like a Q&A for the audience, that moderator can also relay questions from the online audience to your in-person speaker. If it's a large event, you may even want to have two online moderators, one who's serving as the actual moderator for things like the Q&A, and then one who's simply providing tech support to make sure that all of the technology is working well and answer any questions about technology from your audience members. Now, to make this setup work smoothly, you'll want to think about three things: your visuals, your audio, and then any kind of audience engagement or participation. In terms of our visuals, you will need to have a camera that is capturing your speaker so that the online audience can see them. If the speaker is at a podium, this could be a webcam on a laptop, but otherwise you'll need some kind of camera positioned probably in the audience that is capturing the speaker and then sending that feed out to your web conferencing software. You'll also need to be able to capture any other visuals that are part of the presentation, like slides, or if there are handouts, or maybe any kind of object that the speaker is showing the audience. So if they have brought a book, or maybe they've got some kind of physical object that they are going to be showing the audience, you'll need to be able to capture that on camera as well. If the speaker's using slides, that's usually quite easy. Whatever computer they're using to display the slides, you should be able to capture those and send them out to your online audience. If it's something like handouts that you can plan ahead and place a copy online and then just push a link to participants, that's usually pretty easy to handle. But if it is other objects like a read aloud book or an example of a craft that's being made, that might require a second camera that you can cut to, or moving your camera around during a presentation. In terms of audio, we want to ensure that we're able to capture and broadcast whatever the speaker is saying, and that audio quality is going to be very clear, very sharp, loud enough for folks to hear easily. If in terms of capturing your speaker's words, you can purchase a system with a handheld or wearable mic that will amplify the speaker's voice for your in-person audience and simultaneously capture it and stream it to your online audience. So that's usually relatively straightforward with the right technology. But you also will want to think about any audio that's coming from your audience. So if there's going to be a period for comments or questions, excuse me, you'll need to think about how you're going to capture that. So if you have a handheld mic in your audio system that integrates with your web conferencing software, you can pass that around. Alternately, you can ask your speaker or your in-person moderator to repeat all of the questions into the mic before answering them. And that's a good idea regardless, to ensure that everyone in the in-person audience heard the question as well, right? You'll also want to think about how your online audience can participate in any kind of comment or Q&A session. So that can be as simple as having your moderator read questions aloud from the chat, and perhaps going back and forth between your online audience and your in-person audience for questions. Again, you'll also want to consider how to handle any audience participation beyond maybe just a Q&A. So if you have maybe more complex activities, you'll need to think about that ahead of time. So if it's a story time, we can ask kids to sing along at home, maybe with an activity, or to stand up and do the motions of a dance along with the speaker. If it's something more complicated, like a makerspace activity where you're demonstrating how to do a craft, and then you would normally circulate around the room to help participants, that's going to be a little bit more difficult with your online audience. And so it is going to take a little bit more pre-planning. And that's something too you'll need to think about if it's a guest speaker who is coming in from outside of your library. How much prep would you need to do for them to be able to interact with that online audience, versus maybe a program that one of your own staff are running, where they can do some planning ahead of time, even do some practice ahead of time to make sure that things are going to go relatively smoothly. So pulling all of this together, hybrid is going to work well when you have a speaker who is going to be fairly stationary. They're going to stay in the same spot for the entire presentation, where you can set up a single camera and know that they aren't going to wander out of the frame. Where your visuals are limited in scope. So maybe a single set of slides that you can focus on or automatically display to attendees, or perhaps a really predictable cut to something like a read aloud book. Hybrid will also work well when your audience participation is limited or well structured. So a question and answer period that you can moderate, or something that translates well online, like a small group discussion. At the point that you want to break into a small group discussion, you can have some in-person groups, and then your online audience can also be broken into smaller discussion groups. Or something like a polling activity that everyone can participate in on their phone, whether they're in person or online, and those results are then merged. Hybrid is also going to work well when your speaker is comfortable with that format. Again, we want these to feel like an equivalent experience. The online is not just a second class add-on to being there in person. So we want our speaker to engage with that at-home audience equally with our in-person audience. If it's an outside speaker who's coming in, we may not know how comfortable they are with that format. Again, we may not have a lot of time to prep them for that format. And so something really simple like a Q&A can work really well, but we may not be able to expect a whole lot more than that. On the other hand, if this is a program that's being run by one of our own staff who has some experience with presenting online, who feels really comfortable balancing the needs of two different audiences, or working with the technology on the fly, and they can put some time into practicing and working out any kinks, then you might be able to run a more complex hybrid event, even like some kind of hands-on workshop. But finally, too, hybrid is going to work well when you have adequate support structures in place. So if you have enough staff support that you can have a separate tech person to run tech support during a session, if you've got enough staff support that you can have a separate moderator to handle online questions and coordinate with an in-person moderator in that event. So given all that, what kinds of programs might lend themselves well to the hybrid format? I would suggest things like a lecture or panel discussion or an author talk, where again, your speakers are going to be fairly stationary and the audience is primarily listening with a little bit of Q&A interaction at the end. Events like a poetry reading or a concert. Again, the audience is primarily listening and you might take a few comments at the end, or there may not be any audience interaction at the end of the event. Simple classes and maker programs. So classes where people are primarily listening and materials can be posted online or picked up in advance. So I think about something like a time management workshop for teenagers, or a workshop on decluttering or estate planning could work really well in this format. Real simple maker type programs that use things people already have at home, or where they could pick up a really simple kit to take back home before the program. So something like a creative writing program. People are writing poetry or haiku or song lyrics, but they just need a paper and pencil at home. Or a simple art program like Zen doodling or neurographic art, which are really popular these days. People need paper and markers, and they could do that from home. Also, you might think about the kinds of programs where people are online already. So for example, if you're interested in reaching out to teens and you want to have a gaming night, a lot of teens are already online talking to their friends while they're gaming. So you could have a hybrid program where some of your teenagers are coming into the library to play games together, but you're also on Discord and you can give that link to the teens who want to participate from home. And that way, all of these teenagers are online using Discord as a way to connect with each other while they're doing some online gaming. Now, knowing that not everything is going to be a great fit for the hybrid format, I just want to remind us of some of those alternatives. One option is to decide a program is just a better fit for in-person programming. Not everything's going to lend itself to hybrid, and that's okay. Another option is to offer a program as online only. So this can be a great way to make your programs more convenient, get a larger audience for something like a weekly language conversation group, or maybe a program like a meditation program. Maybe you just want to go online only instead of hybrid. Finally, you might think about whether you want to offer some programs more than once and in varied formats. So a technology workshop, rather than going hybrid, it might be easier to simply offer it twice, once in person, once online, and that allows your instructor to focus on just one audience and to kind of tweak the program for each format, right? What we do online might be a little bit different than what we would do in person.